Well, I'm back, and this is Robin, the Laughing Crone. And I do hope you saw my first episode. You might notice that I changed the format a little bit, using vertical this time. We'll see which one works best. Technology. But that's a whole other story that I'll tell you at some point in the future. Uh, anyway, before I lose you with my silly sense of humor, and since everyone these days seems to have ADHD, by the way, I think it's an evolutionary trend, but we'll talk about that another time too. Today, the topic is flying fruitcake, as I promised in my last episode. So, do any of you have memories of growing up in childhood that you didn't? Of course, you grew up in childhood um, that you didn't really understand back then, but looking back, all of a sudden the lights go on. Well, that's the term flying fruitcake for me. Back in the 50s and 60s, and yes, I am that old. And in fact, what amazes me is that my mother was born, I think, in 1913. Anyway, again, another time, another story. My mother had been raised in a very proper style. In fact, some would call it the continental style, Europe and all of this. But she would use the word fluff when she was frustrated. No, I didn't say what you think I said. So it's like the lint that you pick off of your sweaters. Fluff, Fluff. Fluff. So I had no idea what the real word was supposed to be. And in fact, I grew up as an adult horrified when my own kids introduced me to the reality of the F word. Yeah, I bet that was a battle for many years. But anyway, what I do remember is that my mother about my mother and this story of the F word. She was in line at a grocery store when she could had trouble finding something in her purse, and she, in her normal way, said, "Oh, fluff." Shocked. The attendant looked at her and said, "What did you say?" Now, can you imagine that happening today? No, it's people just expect it, right? But back then, the F word was never used, and especially in public. So my mother naturally reddened, never used her favorite expression, "oh, fluff," ever again. And it became fruitcake, which is much less apt to be mistaken for the real thing. So as my kids grew up, and I was still trying to maintain that practice of never ever using the F word, well, I became a single parent, and my frustration quickly doubled, even tripled, into my own using flying fruitcake because fruitcake just didn't seem to be enough and it had to be flying fruitcake. So it wasn't until much later in my motherhood that I actually gave up. And all three of my kids were using the F word regularly. And so now, well, depending on how you look at it, fortunately or unfortunately, has become part of my daily vernacular or my frustration vernacular, I should say. So I'm hoping that this particular episode doesn't get sandboxed by social media because they don't understand the word lint. I won't use it again. Um, and in fact, I don't know, these all these different terms that have been coming up, not only the F word, and thank goodness not all of them are like that, but words like ghosted and gaslighted and what the flying fruitcake I figured out what it took me a while, but I figured out what ghosted meant. But gaslighted, I'm still having trouble understanding that one. So it's a whole new world. I'm curious to hear any regular terms of endearment that you use. And that's tongue in cheek, of course. And yeah, hopefully that sandbox will stay away from me and you'll actually be able to see this episode. And of course, it's nice if you put nice comments and nice responses to this episode. Don't use the F word or any other expletives that are going to get me in trouble with the social media people. So, anyway, but I would love to see your comments, and the more the better, obviously. I want this to become fun and popular and that people actually look forward to seeing it. Laughter is so, so very important. So, by the way, if you didn't see my first episode, did you at least, well, I guess you wouldn't have known to do this if you didn't see my first episode. Has anybody out there looked up the word perspicacious? Can you actually say it as fast as I can? Not bad for an old crone, right? So maybe you could comment about that. The word perspicacious. Isn't it a wonderful word? My next episode. Oh, this is going to be a fun one. Why am I here? Does anyone recognize that phrase? It actually comes from an old movie and not a black and white, so it's not that old. But think about it. Why am I here? I'll see you again soon. And in the meantime, remember to smile. This is the Laughing Crone signing off again. Thanks for watching.